Hello everybody, Adrian Plus here.
Yes, and Bridget, hello.
And I think this is number, I've got to get it right this time, because we sometimes get it wrong.
It's 232.
232.
Yeah.
Oh, that's, I still can't believe it. But there we are, number 232.
232, and I don't know where you are in the world, but we're in the north of England, and we have snow. Not deep, but unbelievably cold.
Yeah, it's not very confident snow.
No.
It
Well,
falls. What is
crispy.
amusing is as we sit in the sitting room, every now and then the dog is alarmed by the sight of snow falling off the roof of the... not today because it was so cold, but the other day when the snow first came, suddenly a great white sheet would fall onto the ground outside, and she would start up with a shock. And it's so odd that we have snow so infrequently. It's kind of exciting.
Well, I suppose it is. You were not sitting in my car with me at 8 o'clock this morning, whereby it was -5, and when I put the de-icer on the screen, it immediately froze again.
Yes, but I thought of you often and felt great sympathy, and just what I was pleased about was the pleasure you must be feeling about the fact that I wasn't having to put up
You
with
were in
that.
the warm and cozy
Yes,
house.
precisely.
Do you know what? That didn't occur to me at the time. There must be something wrong with me, I think.
We've had a couple of interesting emails because we haven't really done a lot of catching up with the things people have sent. So what have we?
Well, I think, it is amazing, actually, that only 2 weeks ago, or whenever it was, we had bonfire night on the 5th of November, and it wasn't that cold. I mean, we sat out there. We did have a wood burner, not a wood burner, a fire pit, doing a little fire, but it wasn't
was
that
a wood
cold. Well, I suppose it was a
burning
wood burner.
wood, which was so nice to actually put real wood in a thing and light it. It was
Okay.
great.
Well, anyway, and it wasn't that cold, but just talking about fireworks triggered off quite a reaction from people, didn't it? And there was one lovely one which I was fascinated by. I mean, we used to accumulate people for bonfire, didn't we? I mean, they
Not
used
put on the bonfire.
no, but they would pop in.
No, they did. Yeah, we had
And,
very good. I loved bonfire night.
I think we said it before, but we loved our bonfires until a load of new build was built just behind the end of our garden, and suddenly our bonfires became smut on people's laundry that they were hanging out their washing, so they were no more. But I was interested because somebody was talking about the fact that their whole street came together in a large cul-de-sac at the bottom of the back street, and I was fascinated. So number 5, and this was an email we
People
had.
from house number 5.
Number 5 provided all the all the wood from their greengrocer's shop. Number 7 made parkin. Number 13 made jacket potatoes. Her mum at number 29 made treacle toffee, and number 21 made lemonade. I just love it, really. I'm glad it wasn't us, because if it had been me, my addition would have been toffee apples, in which the toffee never stayed on the apples and always formed a great circle of hard toffee at the bottom. But anyway, isn't that lovely? And
It
everybody
is.
brought
It's a lovely
fireworks.
thought, yeah.
And apparently her dad, the person who sent the email, always brought the big finale firework.
The big finale firework.
Yes.
That's right. And one year, apparently, it exploded, and if I remember this right, it landed on her. In fact, on her
On
back.
her back, yeah.
And she screamed, and her big sister came running over and patted her on the back, asking what was the matter, but was actually patting her right where the firework was burning. And the following year, she got bangers in her Wellington boots, so she went off bonfires a bit.
But I'm sure she did. And there have been some other emails, haven't they? And one of them was about the names of the very ordinary little fireworks that everybody had in their gardens. And we were discussing quite earnestly with some friends the fact that they had such wonderful names. Well, there were traffic lights, which was fair enough because they started red, then went yellow, then went green. But my favourite was Mount Vesuvius. I'd never seen Mount Vesuvius as a little child, but I had visions of it being slightly more dramatic than this tiny little firework that just shot out a little bit of red something and then disappeared. Surely, I thought as a child, Mount Vesuvius must be a little bit more exciting than
Well,
that.
there was, but it's a bit like playing golf doing fireworks, because you only go on playing golf because every 35th shot you hit a half good one. And it was the same with the fireworks. Having something called Mount Vesuvius and thinking maybe this one, when we light it, will explode into a galaxy of stars. Which
Maybe.
I don't think
Or
it
maybe
did,
this year the Catherine wheel will stay on the tree
Stay
and
on
not
the
go
tree, yeah.
shooting off.
or lie on the ground going round rather feebly in a
But
circle.
do you know what
yeah.
struck me? I mean, I know that lots of people go to displays and I know that that's encouraged. But what happened was, talking to these people about Mount Vesuvius and traffic lights and Roman candle and some of these other things, there was a kind of community of memory. Do you know what I mean?
Because of the names.
Well,
yeah.
no, just because we had it in common. I mean,
Yeah.
rather like one of our sons was saying that even in his memory, everybody was watching the same thing on TV. I mean, there were only 2 channels. So in the morning on
There's
the
only
bus...
only one
only
in our
one
house
for a long
when we
time.
started. Yeah.
Of course there was. But everybody had watched the same thing. So on the bus or at school, he was talking about at school, everybody had seen the same programme. And there was a sort of unifying thing going on. And it made me wonder how different that is, because there's so much selection, streaming. I mean, we do it.
Yeah.
And I know loads of people who don't want to see the adverts, so they stream things, and everybody's streaming. And it means you watch what you want to watch when you want to watch it. It's your power. But it does mean that if you said to somebody on the bus, have you seen? They might say, we saw it 3 weeks ago, or no, we're saving it up to, and then you can't tell the spoiler. It just is different, really.
It's a very big larder we keep our potential experiences in, isn't it?
Some more than us, because we don't do a lot of the things. But I was thinking, so what experiences do we have in common? And the person who actually sent us the email about the fireworks said some other things, but just before we get to that, we were in the most lovely church this weekend, weren't we?
We were. It was a really good place to be.
Yeah, and if you're talking about community, what you're talking about is a church that is built together, built the church together, and the pastor there, it's an urban church, and he was saying that as a young guy, it was not that cool to go into a smallish urban church, and you tended to go in there on your way up to higher things or on your way down. But he has made it his home. And as a result, when we were there, we felt so at home, didn't?
Yeah, it was. One of the things I did really like about it was that there wasn't a lot of religion going on, really. There was a feeling that people were sharing an experience that was common to them, and that they could have talked about in a way that possibly might even be explicable to people who didn't know what church was about. And certainly what you're saying makes me think of that. And I mean, a while ago, I remember sitting in this doesn't often happen, I found myself sitting with somebody who definitely was not a Christian, that isn't unusual, but on at the same table were 2 people who were. And the 2 people who were talking to me in the language of evangelical Christianity. And I just couldn't... It was like feeling you have to be a translator. And although the things that were said, I knew what they meant, I realised, and I should have realised it because I've been around all this for so long, that some of the language that is used is... Well, it happens for all sorts of reasons. It happens in order to make sure you don't have to really look at what you're talking about. It happens because you have never actually put into words what happens to you.
But also you've been taught that those are the words that will have an effect, I think.
I suppose so, yeah. I found it, I've always found that difficult, but I've found it a very sobering experience. And even for the people who were saying these things, and I won't go into what they said, but saying things that were really very important to them, but sounded like nonsense, really, because the words had lost touch with what happens. You can call something Mount Vesuvius, which I guess is what you're saying, if you like, and it may be that there's something remarkable and big and different about it, but
deep in your heart you think actually what you've got is a bit of a damp squib, and
you
so
might
you
think
need
that,
the words.
I don't know. That's right, yeah, but you've got
I don't know.
We have struggled and still struggle to find a language that allows things that really happen to you
and that are really important
to be descriptive. If they're whatever they are.
Well, here's your guide.
But the same as anything else. We're not just Christians with anything.
No,
really.
but here's your guide as to what to do to get somebody who
this was interesting,
is a non-believer into your church, or if your numbers are a bit lower than you'd like. It was the same person.
It was the same person writing about this. This is a letter. She found a letter where she works somewhere as a tour guide, written in 1831, which is not upper six, it was more than 200 years ago, from one young brother to another, or about 200, who said that the local vicar thought that there were not enough people coming to his church. So he went to an elderly lady's house. He took her fire tongs and her poker. Now, I don't know whether you're ready for this, those who think we should reach out more, and went round the village crashing them together, trying to drum up support for his church services.
Yes, and she said perhaps that should be taught on evangelism courses. But actually, you know what that reminded me of? It reminded me of that extraordinary time during COVID when we all sat on our doorsteps, stood on our doorsteps. And I remember there was a family opposite us who always brought out a saucepan and wooden spoons and banged. And we were there to celebrate the NHS because we knew how dependent we were on them. And somehow, how do we communicate something that is as important, even more important, something we depend on, something that's part of us? And I think sometimes it is just allowing something to be without naming it, sort of tidying it, making it, because as soon as you do that, it's like a foreign language to people.
I'm sure it's partly that, yeah. I think it's also, though, that conceptually you're dealing with things that are not explicable in normal terms. So somehow you have to find a way to allow that to happen, and perhaps poetry is the way.
Well, you say that, and that's interesting, because I came across, actually one of our sons sent it to us because he'd heard this guy who's called John Chalice, which is nothing to do with Only Fools and Horses. He's a poet, and he sent me his book, and I don't understand all of them, let's be honest, but there's something there were lots of them I found really interesting. I don't know if this guy has any faith. I don't know if he proclaims to not have a faith. But there's something about the way he writes that I found very helpful. You know, we were talking about labeling our fireworks. We're talking about trying to label experience as Christians, trying to talk about it with these words that we've been given. And this is the poem. It's called Naming the Light. We've christened light as light, but it has no knowledge of the name. It doesn't notice how it falls between the branches and the blinds, or how it casts a glow on us who rise to meet its wakening in every living form. Don't cheapen it as the reward. It doesn't think itself the doing of the Lord. It has no mind to show the way where everything has burned. When we face the darkness, light will fall out of our language. I know if I'm to name this lost for words I feel with you, that I would call it the Lord's work if I were a man of faith. The word would never do. And would I want to, when our silence is enough? And to me, Adrian, that really conjures up the sort of genuine wonder that I still feel about God and creation and beauty and my response to it that I don't understand at all. I still feel that, but as soon as you try and put it into words, now you use language beautifully, so maybe you would disagree with this, but I think you would say that poetry is sometimes the only way that you can open up an area without stamping all over it and turning it into a series of cliches that aren't quite what they would like to be, like Mount Vesuvius and Roman Candle. And
there are plenty of people out there who know much more about poetry than I do, but I have found putting things into a poetic form, and I was trying to think actually just this week what I'm talking about with poetry. I mean, every now and then people who write any even crap poetry, which I've done plenty of, as well as one or two not too bad, asking yourself, what am I doing here? What do I think I've got here? And I think when you're honest, it's looking at something with a truth that is opening itself up to be captured, like a bird that flies, that you can actually get a grip on, and you can put it in something just to look at. It doesn't get jailed, but it gets held and becomes visible. And when you were reading that poem, I was thinking about another poem, which is certainly not a Christian poem, which is Naming of Parts.
Well, there you go. It's very... I think that is the GCSE or GCE poem that many people will know, Adrian.
Probably,
it was certainly taught in most secondary schools.
Well, it was. It's about a man who was in the army, and he's being taught how to use a rifle, basically. I won't read any of it, but as he stands, sits, or whatever he's doing there, he's looking around at the sounds and the sights that are so beautiful around, and the sergeant major, whoever he is saying, now we come to naming of parts. And so that's very practical in dealing with something that kills people. And meanwhile, he's just seeing and hearing beautiful things. And what
Japonica glistens.
That's right. Yeah. And, what we have failed and continue to fail to do with things that light us up in things like faith is to talk about those beautiful things, instead of making lists of how you do it and what the process is, and how if you don't do that it won't work properly, and if you do that it will work properly. I'm not sure what that process is, but I have worked really hard, especially in a couple of recent books, to have a character who's trying to do that, to explore what will happen if you step aside from that. Because a lot of people are really attracted by, for instance, community, which isn't a word that is owned by the Christian Church.
Well, they think it is sometimes, if I'm honest, but it so isn't. Oh, sorry.
So people say, "Oh, yes, I would like to be there. I've met some people, and it seems good, and I'd like to be part of it."
Well, that's a sort of intentional community where you make a decision to live with other people as community. But when I read that email, and I thought, well, what more could you ask than that number, whatever it was, makes the parking, and number whatever it was does something, and they know their role, and they fulfill it comfortably because they're part of something bigger. So they don't have to be the one who makes the whole thing.
So there's the question: is it that actually people often don't have a concept that is can be put into words at all? And is it that we falter and fall when we're asked to say, how in a world that is a real world do we communicate something that means so much to us?
But you see, I remember your mum, when I first met your mum, and we seemed to spend our time talking about our faith, putting it into words, and her saying, you two just talk too much. And the more I got to know her, the more I know that she lived out her life with a reality of what that involved. And just today, Adrian, at the cafe, which also has the food bank, There were people staggering in with huge bags of stuff that had all come from one lady who is so committed. She's housebound, she has a carer, but so committed to supporting the people who have nothing that almost, I don't know, on a regular basis anyway, she sends her carer with quite a lot of money to go and buy stuff for the food bank. And I doubt if she'll ever be acknowledged publicly. Public news is so negative. But she is part of a community without ever seeing the people who are going to receive from her. Do you see what I mean? Because of her, they benefit hugely.
Yeah. Well, we certainly know of no intention on her part to make something happen. Make something happen other than allow people to have food when they need it.
That's right.
Yeah.
But that is still surely part of community, that you know that the people who have nothing are part of your community, of your group, of your tribe.
Well, it can be, yeah. And I mean, there are plenty of people doing that work who aren't believers or people of faith anyway.
I don't know if she is, Adrian.
I don't have no idea.
I'm not labelling anything at all.
But in our little world, I do think there is a case for saying, and just as a matter of interest, but I was thinking today, I've once or twice had a real go at this. In one of my books, I tried really hard to think, what can I truthfully say I have understood to be the basis of what I believe? And I have written that, and I'm not going to read it now, I promise.
No, but maybe next week, Adrian.
Maybe next week. But,
waiting to
but
see
it's not
what
that,
it is.
It is extremely difficult.
Yeah.
But it really depends on a commitment to truth, which is, I don't know what truth is really, but about looking into yourself.
The trouble is, that's a word in itself.
Well, of course it is, but looking into yourself and saying, this actually happens to me.
Yeah.
This is where it comes from.
This is what I really am thinking at the moment.
And I'm trying to put it into words that will mean something to you,
Yeah.
even though it will be, in some senses, seem far away from what you've understood until now. But anyway. Yeah,
Well,
so there we
thank you
are.
for emailing, and please keep contacting us because we find it so interesting, and I know that for other people it is the things that they particularly remember from our little chats. So
Yeah, that's
do
true.
keep going, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Yes, indeed. And Christmas is coming.
Well, no, not yet. It's not. Come on.
It's not far away. See you next
But
week.
snow
anyway.
is probably coming.
Yeah, bye-bye.